What is software documentation? Hey there, my name is Josh and I have over 10 years of experience in technical writing in software. I'm also the founder of Technical Writer HQ, and in this video we'll cover what the definition of software documentation is, its benefits, different types, and how to outline the most popular documentation pieces. But before we jump in, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos on how to create great documentation. Now, let's go ahead and begin. Software documentation is a term that encompasses all documentation created throughout the whole software development lifecycle. Developing a software product is a complex task that requires efficient organization and information management. And that's why the purpose of software documentation is to unify the information related to the development of a software project and to provide guidelines that promote discussion of the essential questions that arise between stakeholders and developers and many other parties like product managers and designers. This helps users and developers understand the features and functions of a software product. And this type of technical documentation consists of written tutorials, videos, user guides, and training manuals, which are intended to help users understand the features, operations, and functionality of a software product. And the types of software documentation and their scope will depend on the approach of development that the team has chosen. And there are two main types of software documentation approaches. You have Agile and you have Waterfall. Each approach is unique and they have their own pros and cons. The Waterfall approach is a linear method that establishes different objectives for each phase of the development process. Development teams that use the Waterfall approach spend a lot of time planning a software product from the early stages, and they focus on a long overview of the development process and start creating detailed documentation before the development process even begins. And this type of approach works well for projects with little or no change during the software development lifecycle. This includes many enterprise software and on-premise installation products. It's much less effective when it comes to consumer products and freemium software. That's where the Agile approach comes into play. It requires efficient teamwork, close collaboration between stakeholders and customers, flexibility, and the ability to adapt to any unexpected changes. The philosophy of this approach is that it's best used for project scopes that change frequently over time. And the Agile approach does not need complete documentation from the beginning, but it's always best to start documenting as early as possible anyways. This allows for just-in-time planning. As one of the Agile Manifesto values suggests, putting working software over comprehensive documentation is really what Agile is about. And the idea is to produce documentation with information that is essential to move forward when it makes the most sense. As stated earlier, the primary goal of software documentation is to ensure that developers and stakeholders are moving in the same direction to meet project goals, and to help end users better use the product. To achieve this, there are different types of documentation. Let's focus on the two main types. You have product documentation and process documentation in software. And we'll first take a deep dive into product documentation. Product documentation describes the product you are developing and provides instructions on how to perform various tasks with it. It includes technical requirements, technical specifications, business logic, and how-to manuals. The two main types are system documentation and user documentation. System documentation includes documents that describe the system itself and its parts. It's comprised of requirement documents, design decisions, architecture descriptions, program source code, and frequently asked questions. Let's get a better look at system documentation with some examples. And here are the different types of system documentation. The first is Product Requirements Document, or PRD. This is one of the most popular types. And this document provides information about the system's functionality. In general, requirements are statements of what a system must do. It contains business rules, user stories, use cases, and more. This is an example of a one-page product requirements document so that you can understand the elements that make up a PRD. Now, here are the main elements to include in your PRD. You have roles and responsibilities. Start your document with the information about the project participants, including a product owner, team members, and stakeholders. These details will clarify responsibilities and communicate the target release goals for each of the team members. Team goals and business objectives. Define the most important goals in a short point form. And then we have background and strategic fit. Provide a brief explanation of the strategic aim of your actions. Why are you building a product? How do your actions affect product development and align with the company's goals? Now, add assumptions. Create a list of technical or business assumptions that the team might have. And then we have user stories. List or link user stories that are required for the project. A user story is a document written from the point of view of a person using your software product. And the user story is a short description of customer actions and results they want to achieve. Next, we have acceptance criteria. Those are the conditions that indicate a user story is completed. The main purpose of acceptance criteria is to define a satisfactory result for a usage scenario from the end user perspective. And then we have user interaction and design. Link the design explorations and wireframes to the page. And we have questions. As a team solves the problems along the project progression, they inevitably have many questions arising. A good practice is to record all these questions and track them. And then we have not doing. You want to list the things which you aren't doing, but may plan on doing in the future or are completely off the table. Such a list will help you organize your teamwork and prioritize features. Now for some pro tips when it comes to creating PRDs. Use links and anchors. They will help you make the document easier to read and search as readers will be able to comprehend the information gradually. For instance, you can provide links to customer interviews and anchors to previous discussions or other external information related to the project. You should use graphics and diagramming tools to better communicate the problems to your team if they're hard to understand via text. And people are more likely to perceive information by looking at the images than reading an extensive document. Different visual models will help you to perform this task and outline requirements more effectively. And you can incorporate diagrams into your requirements process using the following software diagramming tools such as Visio, Balsamiq, or Figma. And the second system documentation is the user experience design documentation. The UX design process includes research, prototyping, usability testing, and the actual design part during which a lot of documentation and deliverables are produced. UX documentation can be divided into stages. The research stage includes user personas, user scenario, scenario map, user story map, and user experience style guide. Here's an example of a user story map documentation so you can understand the elements that make it up. Now let's talk about the software architecture design document. These documents, which are also called technical specifications, include the main architectural decisions made by the solution architect. Unlike the product requirements document, which describes what needs to be built, the architecture design documentation is about how to build it. The software architecture design document gives an overview of the product architecture, determines the full scope of work and sets milestones, thus linking all involved team members and providing general guidance. Let's see this example of software architecture documentation of Microsoft Azure. Take a second to pause to get a better understanding here of what it may look like. The next systems document is a source code document. A source code document is a technical section that explains how the code works. The main users of the source code document are software engineers. Source code documents may include, but are not limited to, the following details. You have HTML generation framework and other frameworks applied, types of data binding, design pattern with examples such as model view controller, security measures, and other patterns and principles. Then we have quality assurance documentation. There are different types of user acceptance testing or quality assurance testing in Agile particularly. The most common include quality management plan, test strategy, test plan, test case specifications, and test checklists. And the other type of product documentation from the graph that you saw earlier, let's check it out again real quick and pause for a second so you can get an idea of how it's related, is user documentation. And user documentation is super important to understand. Generally, user documentation is aimed at just two audiences. You have the end users and system administrators. Now let's go through the different user documentation pieces. And we'll start with the end user documents. It's meant to give end users a better experience with their product by explaining how to use it. It includes the Quick Start Guide, which provides an overview of the product's functionality and gives basic guidelines on how to use it. It will also include sometimes a complete manual, which is an exhaustive information instructions on how to install and operate the product. And it lists the hardware and software requirements, a detailed description of the features, and full guidelines on how to get the most out of them. Also example inputs and outputs, possible tips and tricks, and much more. We also have the troubleshooting guide here, which gives end users information on how to find and resolve possible issues that might arise when using the product. And of course, we have some of the more shorter common types, which are FAQs, video tutorials, embedded assistance, and support portals. Next on the list is the system administrator's document. System administrators documents do not need to provide information on how to operate the software. These documents instead cover installation and updates that help the system administrator with product maintenance. The type of user documentation includes the functional description and the system administrator's guide. The other main category of software documentation is process documentation. It's made up of all the documents produced during development and maintenance, as its name indicates, and it describes the process. The most common examples of process-related documents are SOPs, so standard operating procedures, project documentation such as project plans, test schedules, reports, meeting notes, or even just business correspondence. Although it's very similar to product documentation, the main difference is that process documentation records the development process, while product documentation describes the product being developed. Another common process documentation is Agile approach product roadmaps. Roadmaps are used as process documents to keep the course of development in sync with the initial goals. Depending on the type of product roadmap, it can express high-level goals, task prioritization, the sprint timeline, or low-level details. Let's start with the strategic roadmap. This is a high-level strategic document that contains general information about the project. Strategic roadmaps typically set out a long-term vision and goals. Grouping information around topics makes a roadmap very flexible and updatable, which is ideal for sprint-based development. And the best advice regarding the strategic roadmap is to include only important information. Let's look at an example of strategic product roadmap and take a second to pause to get a feel for it. Now let's talk about the technology roadmap or IT roadmap. This is a low-level document that describes the technical requirements and means of implementing a certain technology. IT roadmaps are quite detailed and contain the information of each deliverable, explaining the reason for such a decision. And this is what an IT roadmap looks like. Take another second to pause to get a better idea here. And the last type of Agile approach roadmap is the release plan. This document is used to set strict time limits for releases. A release plan should focus on actual time frames without specifying release details. And let's see what a release plan looks like. And feel free to take another second to pause here. And there we have it. We cover a lot of information about what is software documentation, the many types, and how to outline many of the most important pieces like PRDs of your software documentation. And if you enjoyed this video and you feel like you have a much better understanding of what software documentation entails, make sure to go ahead and give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more technical writing content, and to learn all about documentation. And I'll go ahead and see you in some of our following videos. Cheers.